The night was quiet in Sevastopol's bay. The water reflected the faint lights of the Russian naval base, where hulking submarines rested at their piers like sleeping beasts. Guards smoked on the docks, certain that no enemy could ever reach them here. Moscow had promised that Sevastopol was untouchable, the fortress of the Black Sea. But at 02:03 a.m., the quiet ended. From the dark horizon, faint engines hummed. First one, then many. Patrol boats reported unidentified contacts, but the echoes vanished from radar. The sea seemed empty until the first explosion ripped through the stillness. A fireball erupted near the outer breakwater, throwing columns of water into the sky. Sirens wailed, guards scrambled, and then the true nightmare began. Dozens of drones, both from the sea and the air, poured into the bay. Russian sailors opened fire wildly, tracers cutting across the night. But it was too late. One drone slammed into a submarine's hull. The blast lit up the harbor, flames racing along the pier. Within minutes, Sevastopol, the heart of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, was burning. And with it, the myth of invincibility. For over 2 centuries, Sevastopol had been Russia's jewel on the Black Sea. Carved into the Crimean coast, its harbors sheltered fleets that fought Ottoman sultans, British admirals, Nazi divisions, and now Ukrainian defenders. To Moscow, Sevastopol was more than a city. It was a fortress, a symbol, a message carved in stone. We control the Black Sea. At the heart of this fortress lay the submarine base. Long piers stretched into deep water, designed to host vessels capable of carrying caliber cruise missiles. The very weapons that had rained down on Ukrainian cities since the first days of the war. From Sevastopol's calm waters, missiles had flown toward Odessa, Lviv, Kyiv. Every blast that darkened Ukraine's power grid or shattered an apartment block carried Sevastopol's shadow. Russian state media never missed a chance to boast. Anchors described the base as impenetrable, guarded by layers of radar, warships, and anti-drone nets. It was presented as a fortress within a fortress, a place Ukraine could never touch. Crowds in Moscow were told that even NATO feared Sevastopol's defenses. To Russian sailors, it was a posting of pride. Serving in Sevastopol meant standing on the front line of empire, part of the fleet that had humiliated adversaries for generations. When submarines returned from missions, bands played on the docks, and propaganda cameras rolled. Children waved flags as officers disembarked. It was a theater of power, staged to remind the world, and Russians themselves, that the Black Sea was theirs. But the truth behind the parades was different. Ukraine knew that Sevastopol was not invincible. Intelligence revealed weaknesses, outdated sonar, tired crews, defenses stretched thin after months of attrition. The base was designed for a 20th century war, not for the swarms of drones and precision strikes of the 21st. Nets could stop divers, but not robotic boats. Radars could track planes, but not tiny aircraft made of carbon fiber, flying low and silent. For Ukraine, the submarine base was not just a military target, it was personal. Each caliber launched from Sevastopol had killed civilians, had plunged cities into cold and darkness. The base was the beating heart of Russia's terror campaign. To strike it would mean more than a tactical victory. It would mean justice. And so, planners in Kyiv began to whisper of a mission. They envisioned an operation that would do the impossible: breach the fortress, strike the submarines at their moorings, and show the world that Sevastopol could bleed. It would not be easy. It would require technology, allies, and courage. The code name came naturally: Operation Neptune's Fire. Named after the god of the sea, it was a promise that flames would rise from the waters Russia believed untouchable. And when those flames came, they would burn away more than submarines. They would burn away illusions. The idea was bold, almost reckless. Strike the heart of Russia's Black Sea fleet, not at sea, but in its lair. Most military planners would have dismissed it as impossible. Sevastopol was a fortress. Heavy radars, layered air defenses, anti-drone nets stretched across the harbor, patrol boats prowling the waters every night. The Kremlin boasted that no weapon could touch it. But Ukraine had learned a lesson in this war. Nothing was untouchable. Behind the walls of secrecy, Ukraine's allies helped shape the plan. British intelligence provided high-resolution satellite images of Sevastopol's harbor, marking submarine berths, fuel depots, and weak points in the defenses. American analysts modeled possible strike patterns, calculating how many drones would be needed to overwhelm the base. Turkish engineers, already seasoned from their work on Bayraktar drones, advised on marine versions. Carbon fiber hulls, stealth coatings, silent electric engines. Each improvement was designed to make the sea drones invisible until it was too late. But it wasn't just hardware, it was strategy. The key insight was simple. Russia's defenses were built to repel traditional threats, missiles, planes, ships. They were not built to fight swarms of cheap, expendable robots coming from every direction at once. In a hidden facility near Odessa, technicians worked around the clock. Dozens of marine drones were assembled, each no larger than a speedboat, but carrying powerful warheads in their bows. Operators tested guidance systems, practicing remote control in stormy seas and moonless nights. Some drones carried explosives, others carried electronic warfare modules designed to jam communications and blind radars. A few even carried cameras, their only task to record the strike and broadcast it to the world. Above them, fleets of aerial drones were prepared to fly low over the bay, drawing fire, confusing radars, and striking fuel tanks. Together, they would form a single swarm, a storm of machines, each small and expendable, but unstoppable in numbers. Ukrainian crews trained relentlessly. In secret naval bases, they launched test runs under cover of night. Operators sat in containers packed with screens, joysticks in hand, learning to guide their machines through simulated defenses. Every drill was timed, every maneuver rehearsed. They practiced until the swarm moved like a single creature. Many bodies, one mind. When exhaustion set in, officers reminded them of why it mattered. Every caliber that left Sevastopol killed our people. Every family that shivers in the dark tonight deserves to see that base burn. The operation would unfold in waves. First, aerial drones would cross the coast, drawing radar attention and soaking up anti-air fire. Second, a vanguard of sea drones would strike the harbor's defenses, the nets, the patrol boats, the outer piers. Then, the main force would slip through the chaos. Their targets: the submarines docked at the central piers, the warehouses storing fuel and ammunition, and the command posts overseeing the fleet. The goal was not just to damage, it was annihilation. To leave the harbor burning, submarines crippled, and the world watching Russia's humiliation in real time. The name chosen carried weight: Operation Neptune's Fire. Neptune, the god of the sea, represented Russia's old dream of control over the Black Sea. Fire represented what Ukraine would bring: destruction from within the fortress itself. The name spread among the crews like a battle cry, painted on the sides of drones, whispered in the bunkers before sleep. It wasn't just a code name anymore, it was destiny. By late summer, the operation was ready. The drones were loaded onto transport trucks, and moved quietly to the coast under the cover of darkness. Operators took their positions in hidden bunkers, screens glowing, hands steady. Aerial drones were staged for launch. NATO satellites hung silently above, their cameras already locked on Sevastopol. The crews spoke little. They had trained for months. Now, everything depended on minutes, even seconds. On the horizon, the lights of Crimea glimmered faintly. Sevastopol slept, confident in its fortress walls. But the walls were already crumbling. Operation Neptune's fire was about to begin. Sevastopol slept under a velvet sky. The waves in the bay lapped gently against the piers, where Russia's prized submarines sat tethered, their hulls black and glistening under floodlights. Guards strolled lazily on the docks, convinced that their fortress was safe. At 01:42 a.m., the first shadows appeared on the horizon. High above the water, a cluster of small aerial drones skimmed low, hugging the coastline. Their engines buzzed faintly, almost like insects in the night. Russian radar screens lit up with sudden blips, alarms sounding across control rooms. Commanders barked orders. Air contact. Prepare intercept. Searchlights swept the sky. Anti-aircraft guns opened fire, tracers stitching the night with red arcs. The drones scattered, diving and weaving, some exploding under fire, others pressing onward. They weren't meant to survive. They were meant to distract. And they did. While the guns thundered upward, the sea below remained unguarded. From the darkness of the open Black Sea, a different sound emerged, low, steady, almost indistinguishable from the waves. Dozens of marine drones, their electric engines silent, raced toward the bay. They moved like predators, their hulls barely visible above the waterline. Operators in hidden bunkers far away guided them with icy focus. On their screens, glowing outlines of the harbor grew larger. At the mouth of Sevastopol's bay, the first defense loomed. Steel nets stretched across the entrance, designed to stop divers and small boats. The lead drones accelerated. At full speed, they slammed into the barriers and detonated. The explosions tore the nets apart, shockwaves shattering nearby patrol boats. The water churned with fire and foam. The gates of the fortress were open. Alarms wailed across the base. Russian sailors scrambled from their bunks, racing to their stations. Patrol boats revved engines, speeding toward the explosions. Officers shouted into radios, demanding answers no one could provide. Then came the second wave. The main body of marine drones surged into the harbor, splitting into groups. Some veered toward the fuel depots, others toward ammunition warehouses, and the rest straight for the submarines. Gunfire erupted from the docks, tracers cutting across the water. Some drones exploded early, shattered by machine gun fire. But for every one destroyed, 3 more pressed forward. At 01:57 a.m., the first drone struck a submarine. The impact erupted with a deafening roar. A fireball shot skyward as the warhead tore into the submarine's hull. Flames consumed the pier, sailors thrown into the air like rag dolls. The vessel groaned, its steel frame twisting, black smoke pouring from its ruptured belly. Shouts of panic echoed across the harbor. "Podlodka gorit! Podlodka gorit!" Before the shock could fade, a second submarine was struck. Another blast, another tower of fire. Water geysered upward, showering the piers with burning fuel. The pride of the Black Sea Fleet was turning into a funeral pyre. Fuel tanks along the shoreline erupted as drones slammed into them. Rivers of fire snaked across the surface of the bay. Explosions echoed one after another as ammunition stores detonated, each blast lighting up the night like a sunrise of destruction. Russian sailors fought desperately, some manning guns, others dragging hoses to fight the flames. But the fire spread too fast. Patrol boats circled wildly, some colliding in the confusion, others struck by drones that slipped past in the chaos. By 02:10 a.m., the entire bay was ablaze. Radio intercepts later revealed the chaos of that night. Russian commanders screamed over the airwaves, "We are under massive attack! Multiple hits on submarines! Fire in Sector 3! We need reinforcements now!" But reinforcements never came. The base was sealed in its own catastrophe. At 02:18 a.m., 2 drones targeted the largest submarine moored at the central pier. The first exploded near its bow, shredding its sonar array. The second struck midship, piercing the pressure hull. The detonation split the vessel open, sending sailors diving into the flames to escape. Moments later, a warehouse filled with torpedoes erupted in a chain reaction. The blast shook the city itself, shattering windows miles away. Witnesses in Sevastopol reported the ground trembling, as if an earthquake had struck. The sky above the harbor glowed red, smoke rising like a pillar visible for miles across Crimea. By 02:30 a.m., the swarm was spent. The last surviving drones streamed live footage back to their operators, burning submarines listing at their moorings, piers collapsing into the water, sailors fleeing into the streets. The operators sat in silence, watching the culmination of months of planning unfold in real time. Some whispered a single word: done. Sevastopol's proud harbor, once filled with the symbols of Russia's naval power, had become an inferno. Flames danced across the water, reflecting in shattered glass and twisted steel. Submarines that had terrorized Ukraine with missile strikes were now gutted hulks, their smoke rising into the night. What Russia had called impenetrable was burning before the eyes of the world. When dawn broke over Crimea, the smoke still curled into the sky. The flames that had devoured Sevastopol's submarine base glowed like coals, blackened wrecks bobbing against shattered piers. The heart of Russia's Black Sea Fleet had been gutted in a single night. The world was already watching. In Moscow, the news landed like a bomb. The Ministry of Defense issued a statement within hours. A minor incident occurred at a naval facility in Sevastopol. Damage is limited. State television anchors echoed the script, insisting the fleet remained fully operational. But social media told another story. Civilians in Crimea had filmed the inferno: burning submarines, exploding warehouses, rivers of fire spreading across the bay. Satellite images released by Western intelligence left no doubt. Sevastopol had been hit harder than at any point since World War II. No amount of propaganda could hide the truth. For Putin, it was humiliation on an unimaginable scale. Sevastopol had been his symbol, the proof of Russia's control over Crimea. Now, its destruction was broadcast worldwide. The fortress was not invincible. It was vulnerable and burning. For the sailors of the Black Sea Fleet, morale collapsed. Survivors spoke of chaos, of drones swarming from every direction, of flames consuming submarines faster than crews could react. Some admitted they had never even seen the attackers until the explosions lit the night. Commanders withdrew ships from exposed harbors, crowding them into ports further east. Patrols were cut back, crews reluctant to venture into open waters. Officers warned privately that the fleet was now a target, not a force. The pride of Russia's navy had been transformed into a liability. In Kiev, the news ignited celebration. Crowds gathered in Independence Square, waving flags, singing and chanting, "Sevastopol is burning." For months, the submarine base had been the source of missiles raining down on their cities. Now, it was rubble. President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the nation with words that reverberated across the world. They called it untouchable. They said Sevastopol was the fortress of the Black Sea. Tonight, that fortress is ashes. Ukraine has shown that even the proudest symbols of aggression can be destroyed. For a people battered by war, it was a moment of vindication, proof that the nightmare could be fought and that myths could burn. In Brussels and Washington, generals studied the operation with awe. NATO officials hailed it as a turning point, not just in the war, but in naval warfare itself. "This is the Pearl Harbor in reverse," one U.S. admiral remarked. "Not the destruction of fleets by bombers, but by swarms of drones." Analysts redrew doctrines overnight. The lesson was stark. Billion-dollar warships and heavily fortified bases could be neutralized by swarms of low-cost, expendable machines. The balance of naval power had shifted irreversibly. Far beyond Europe, the shockwave spread. In Ankara, Turkish officials quietly celebrated. Their drone technology had helped make Neptune's fire possible. Turkey, once caught between Moscow and NATO, now stood vindicated as a pioneer of warfare's future. In Beijing, China's admirals pored over the footage with concern. Their own navy relied on massive fleets and submarine bases vulnerable to the same kind of swarm tactics. If Russia's fortress could fall, so could theirs. In India and the Middle East, buyers reconsidered contracts with Russia's arms industry. Moscow had promised invincible weapons. Instead, the world saw burning submarines and shattered piers. Trust in Russian exports evaporated overnight. Online, the victory became a tidal wave of images and memes. Clips of drones racing across the water cut together with explosions in Sevastopol flooded TikTok and Twitter. Hashtags like Jotr Neptune's fire and Sevastopol burns trended worldwide. One viral video paired footage of the burning bay with the caption, "The fortress that couldn't be touched." Another showed sailors fleeing into the streets, overlaid with text, "Putin's navy runs faster than its missiles." For Russia, the humiliation wasn't just military, it was cultural, global, inescapable. By evening, headlines across the globe captured the same truth. Ukraine's drones annihilate Russia's submarine base. Sevastopol in flames, Black Sea fleet humiliated. The end of fortress warfare. The destruction of Sevastopol's base was no longer just a Ukrainian victory. It was a lesson etched in fire. In the 21st century, walls, harbors, and fleets were no longer safe. And for Russia, it was a nightmare, one that had only just begun. The fire in Sevastopol's bay burned long after the drones were gone. Black smoke curled over the city, staining the dawn sky, a scar visible from miles away. The proud silhouettes of submarines, once instruments of terror, now lay half-submerged, twisted and broken at their moorings. It was more than the destruction of steel. It was the destruction of a myth. For centuries, naval power had meant harbors, fortresses, fleets. Sevastopol embodied that vision, a bastion carved into the cliffs, a fortress that Moscow claimed could never be touched. Operation Neptune's fire proved otherwise. Drones slipped past walls, nets, and guns. The very sea Russia thought it commanded became the path of its defeat. The message was clear: there are no safe harbors anymore. The lesson was not just for Russia. Admirals in every capital saw the same truth. The age of massive fleets and fortified bases is ending. The future belongs to swarms, cheap, expendable, precise, and unrelenting. A billion-dollar submarine can be reduced to wreckage by a machine that costs a fraction of its price. A fortress that stood for centuries can be set ablaze by weapons that fit in a truck. Naval warfare has entered a new age, where innovation beats tradition and agility defeats mass. For Moscow, the loss was humiliation. For Ukraine, it was vindication. And for the world, it was revelation. Sevastopol's burning was not just a battlefield event. It was a signal flare, warning every nation. Myths cannot protect you. Operation Neptune's fire showed that power is not measured by what you build, but by what you can adapt to. As the last flames smoldered in Sevastopol's harbor, the world understood. Russia's Black Sea dream had drowned in its own bay. The invincible fleet was not invincible. The fortress was not untouchable. Operation Neptune's fire reduced centuries of pride to ashes. And with it, the myth of naval invulnerability burned away.